All right, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carolyn Arrett. I'm the town clerk here for the town of Renfrew. As most of you here in this room know, there has been some changes to legislation that have prompted kind of the community policing and local police service boards to change. So under the new Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, which has come into effect on April the 1st, 2024, police service boards are being dissolved and they're being replaced with the OPP Detachment boards. So in our area, serviced by the Upper Valley, Ontario Provincial Police. We're represented here today with 7 municipalities: the town of Arnprior, the town of McNab, Braeside, the township of Greater Madawaska, the township of Horton, the town of Renfrew, the township of Admiston and Bromley, and the township of Greater Whitewater region. I think, yeah, great. So with all that said, I'm going to call this meeting to order at officially 1:10 and welcome everybody to the inaugural meeting of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board. And I will note for the record that this meeting is being recorded and that it's not being broadcasted at this time. Okay, so I'll do the land acknowledgements. So I'd like to acknowledge that as we gather here today on behalf of the Renfrew Police Services and OPP Detachment Board and our community, that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continuous display of friendship. We'd also like to thank all generations of people who have taken the care of this land for thousands of years. Okay, so as this is our inaugural meeting, roll call is going to be slightly different than normal. I'm going to call everybody alphabetically. I'd like you to, and I'll call the 7 members that are represented from the councils. When I call your name, can you please state that you're present, and then read or recite the oath and confirmation that's before you. Okay, so we'll get started. So Councillor Scott Brim, Township of McNab, Braeside.
Present. I, Scott Broom, solemnly swear, affirm that will upheld the Constitution of Canada, which recognizes and affirms Aboriginal treaty rights, Indigenous peoples, and that I will do my best. Where are we? Do my best. The ability to discharge my duties as member of the Renfrew Police Service OPP Detachment Board, faithful, impartial, and according to the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, any other act and other regulation, rule, or bylaw, so help me God. I can affirm and I can confirm with certainty that I have completed the mandatory training required under the Community Safety Policing Act 2019, and that I am unaware of any reason why I would be ineligible to sit as a voting member the Renfrew Police Service OPP Detachment Board.
Great, thank you. Councillor Glenn Campbell, Township of Horton.
Okay, present. I, Glenn Campbell, solemnly swear, affirm that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, which recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights of Indigenous peoples, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board faithfully, impartially, and according to the Community Safety and Policing Act of 2019 and any other act and any regulation, rule, or bylaw, so help me God. I can confirm with certainty that I have completed the mandatory training required under the Community Safety and Policing Act of 2019 and that am unaware of any reason why I would be ineligible to sit as a voting member of the Police Services OPP Detachment Board.
Councillor Angela Field, Township of Admiston Bromley.
Present. I, Angela Field, solemnly swear and affirm that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, which recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights of Indigenous peoples, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board faithfully, impartially, and according to the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, any other act and any regulation, rule, or bylaw on my honor. I can confirm with certainty that I have completed the mandatory training required under the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, and that I am unaware of any reason why I would be ineligible to sit as a voting member on the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board.
Great, thank you. Councillor Jason Legree, Town of Renfrew.
Present. I, Jason Legree, solemnly swear, affirm that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, which recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights of Indigenous people, and that I will, to my best of ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board faithfully, impartially, and according to the Community Safety and Policing Act of 2019, any other act, and any regulations, rule by bylaw. So help me God. I can confirm with certainty that I have completed the mandatory training required under the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, and that I am unaware of any reason why I would be ineligible to sit as a voting member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board.
Thank you. Mayor Lisa McGree.
So I'm present, and I'm also going to make apologies. I'll be taking my oath later, per my conversation with Carolyn. I am the delinquent in this group. I have not yet managed to finish my online training, but that will be done before next meeting, and I will take oath. And my understanding is that I'm not able to vote, but I am excited to participate here.
Perfect. Councillor Connie Tabert, Township of Whitewater Region.
Present. I, Connie Tabert, solemnly swear and affirm that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, which recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights of Indigenous people, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board faithfully, impartially, and according to the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, any other act, and any regulation, rule, or bylaw. So help me God. I can confirm with certainty that I have completed the mandatory training required under the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019 and am not aware of any reason why I would be ineligible to sit as a voting member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Robert Tripp, Township of Greater Madawaska.
Present. I, Robert Tripp, solemnly swear, affirm that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, which recognizes and affirms Aboriginal and treaty rights of Indigenous peoples, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board faithfully, impartially, and according to the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, any other act, and any regulation, rule, or bylaw, so help me God. I can confirm with certainty that I have completed the mandatory training requirement under the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, and that am unaware of any reason why I would be ineligible to sit as a voting member of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board.
Okay, great. I just want to thank all 7 board members for being here with us today. Based on the board composition that we'll discuss kind of a little bit further in the agenda, I do want to note that we do have quorum. Out of the 11 board members, we have 6 who have their training done and are eligible, so we can proceed with the remaining of the meeting today. So as much as I like to talk, my capacity here today is as administrator only. I've been assigned by the 7 municipalities, which I will greatly thank them for later, to get this detachment board up and running. And so my role for this past few months has been to learn the ins and outs of the Act, correspond with the ministry as well as the Inspectorate of Policing, and kind of ease the overall transition, both with our kind of Renfrew Police Service Board as well as to aid in the other municipalities in transitioning theirs over. So again, that is my capacity here today. So on a formal basis for this board to be able to move forward, we do need a chair and a vice chair, and that will kind of finalize the composition of the board so that you guys can get up and running and kind of going along the way. So what I would like to say and put out to the floor, is there any members that are interested in kind of putting their name forward, or any member that would like to nominate another member for the position of chair? Okay.
Thank you. I had expressed interest in the position of chair and would just like to present that to the floor. Thank you.
So I could have, if that would be the case, I would say if I could have a mover for that the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board appoint Robert Tripp to be the chair. So I've got Scott and Jason. Okay, all in favor? Okay, carried. Okay, perfect. Well, that was easy. So moving on to the vice chair position. Again, is there anybody who would like to put their name forward? Okay, excellent. So I do have one name forward. Is there? Okay, so I'll call for that the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board appoint Scott Broom to be, sorry, Scott Broom, I will get that right, to be the vice chair. Can I have a mover? Glenn and Connie, all in favor? Excellent, so that's carried as well. So I'm going to ask the chair to come up and have a seat beside me. I guess I conveniently put you at the end. Really, that was just based on the last name. So you get the fun part. You get to take over the meeting from here. So I have, for ease, I've kind of given some speaking notes to whoever was the chair. That kind of runs through the remainder of the agenda, but I will be here to help guide you along the way.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you for this. And thank you all for your support. And congratulations to Councillor Broom as well. It's an exciting time, and I think our team is really quite spectacular, the people who've stepped up through the different municipalities. And I think we're going to be a cohesive group going forward. So really honored to have the opportunity to chair for the inaugural year. And then I understand we'll have an AGM in January, and that we'll have this as an annual voting process. So hopefully people can have an opportunity to rotate through the chair as well, and the vice chair. So thank you again for your support. And thank you so much, because you always wonder when the vote happens and you step up, and this is a very small agenda that we have, but there's all of the details and the nuances behind, so it's been prepared. So thank you very much. And the first one will be a bit unusual because this is our inaugural, and then we'll fall into a more traditional path going forward with the structure of the agenda. But the inaugural is the one where we're really setting the stage for things to come. So the first is on the declaration of interests. And do I have any members of the board who wish to declare interest on any of the following items? Thank you. Seeing none. And then delegations and presentations. We have no delegations or presentations noted for today's meeting. I do want to thank the Detachment Commander Don Ferguson and Acting Detachment Commander Steve Bosa for being here with us today at the inaugural meeting. We certainly look forward to working with you on this the new detachment board. And is there anything that you would wish to state just for the board's attention today? Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. And there will be later on in the meeting discussions about setting an opportunity to come and present to us. So pleased to have you here today for the inaugural. Thank you for taking the time and coming out. Confirmation of minutes. Is this being the first inaugural meeting of the Renfrew Services OPP Detachment Board? We don't have any minutes to approve. And we can transfer the past minutes from each of the local services boards should they transpire. Any unfinished business arising from those minutes will be brought forward to us moving forward. So moving on to items of business. There's two key items that have been noted on the agenda. The first one, 7.1, the draft review of the Police Services OPP Detachment Board Terms of Reference. And I'll read the motion to get the item on the floor for discussion. That the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board receive the draft Terms of Reference for review. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Broom, and I promise I'll have names by the end of and Councillor Talbot, thank you. And a vote, all in favor? Oh, sorry, no vote, sorry, that's right, just to bring it forward. Yeah. Thank you.
Would you like me to speak to it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so as part of the agenda package, I have kind of attached a draft copy of the terms of reference. This kind of gives an outline of what this detachment board is, what your mandate is, kind of the membership, the composition, as well as kind of general responsibilities. So the document's there for those to read. It's also on the website for public reference as well, but just a few items that I'm going to highlight. And again, I'm going to emphasize that this is the draft version. I'm not looking for approval of it tonight. I thought everybody could get it on the floor, have some discussion, and then we can bring it back as a final version maybe to the next meeting for adoption. So the mandate of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board is legislatively mandate to work with the OPP Detachment Commander to make decisions where appropriate and to submit information to the municipal councils in other matters in accordance to the Community Safety and Policing Act. Okay. The membership itself, I've spoken a little bit to this, but just to give it kind of the official rundown, it is one member of council from each of the 7 municipal councils. So as you see here today, 7 council representatives, 2 community representatives, which will be appointed by the board. And that is actually as an item of discussion later on in our agenda. We'll be going into close for that. We have received some applications with an expression of interest that went out to all the municipalities. Those applications have been received, and the board members will have a chance to review those applicants and make some decisions from there. Those, if the board is to select 2 members, that endorsement will go forward to the individual councils for council appointment. So despite the board making their selections today, again, those appointments will not be officially made until such time as the councils endorse them. The other 2 are 2 provincial representatives. Those will be appointed directly from the province. I have been talking to the Inspector of Policing. He has indicated that likely those appointments will not transpire until later in the summer, sometime even into the fall. The board composition has been made so that we can still proceed with meetings. The quorum, as we talked about, is still able to proceed, and then when those appointees are made, they'll be provided to the board and we can move forward with them in hand. Okay, and then terms of membership. The board itself, the detachment board itself, is appointed in general for the term of council. So this board will be appointed until the next election, which will be held in 2026. As Mr. Tripp has already indicated, there is an annual meeting where the opportunity to elect a new chair and change a recording secretary and make other business at that time can be done as part of the annual general meeting. But the 7 appointees, unless dictated from your councils, will remain as part of the board members until that time. The structure of the board, again, I've mentioned there is a chair, a vice chair, which will be elected annually. There'll be a recording secretary, which will be appointed by the board annually. And one thing I have not noted at this time, because I do think it's a further discussion down the road, is some type of treasurer or financial oversight. So that's something that the board will probably need to look at. The composition of that from the province is a little bit still gray, is a good way of putting it. Some boards are using a secretary-treasurer. Some boards are going directly to a treasurer, like the treasurer of the municipality. And in our case, because we have a couple local boards that all have money tied into their municipalities, then I think we're unique in the part that we're going to have some further discussion on that one. Okay. The general responsibilities of the board, again, we'll be consulting with the commissioner regarding the selection of a detachment commander, the determining of objectives and priorities for the detachment, but not inconsistent with the strategic plan that's been prepared by the minister, advising the detachment commander with respect to policing provided within the detachment, monitoring the performance of the detachment commander, reviewing the reports of the detachment commander with regards to policing provided in the area, and annually on or before June 30th of each year, providing an annual report to the municipalities regarding the policing provided by the detachment within their municipalities. Okay, and a whole bunch of other stuff that's outlined in the Community Safety and Policing Act. Those are just the highlights. Meetings themselves, the Act speaks to a minimum of 4 meetings a year that can be called by the chair or vice chair. Likely, there could be more. I think as we get things off the ground, we will probably be seeing a few more meetings, depending on what's going on with policing in the areas. You know, opportunities might come up where more meetings are called, but at a minimum, we're at 4 meetings a year. All meetings are open to the public unless they're stipulated under Section 44(2) of the Community Safety and Policing Act, which provides specific guidelines as to when we can go into closed. And then greater than 50% of the OPP Detachment Board members is eligible to vote, shall constitute as quorum. So again, the board itself is 11 members. We have 6 here today with voting powers, therefore we've met quorum. Okay, if there's ever an opportunity where we haven't met quorum, then the meeting unfortunately cannot go ahead. And that is all I have.
Perfect, thank you very much. Any comments? Sorry, thank you. So comments from the floor, having none, we'll continue along. I just want to reinforce that this is in fact draft, and it will be an opportunity to come back at a subsequent meeting as well. So if there is no discussions, I'd like to call for a vote, noting that the draft will be back for the board's approval at the next scheduled meeting. All in favor? We have a motion for first and second, so it's just all in favor now. Perfect, that's carried, thank you. Agenda item 7.2, and this is the draft review of the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board procedural bylaw. And I'll read the motion again to have it on the floor for discussion, that the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board receive the draft procedural bylaw for review. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Legree and Councillor Broom. Thank you.
So this is the wonderful document that is attached again to the agenda package. It is quite lengthy. It is quite detailed. The procedural bylaw is what governs our meetings, and so there's a reason why it is quite lengthy. This is kind of our rules, guidelines, everything that we use to kind of operate. So this procedural bylaw has been developed both in consultation with Lanark County's detachment board. I did reach out to their team and kind of taken their copy of it and adapted it to meet our needs as well. I've also consulted with the Inspectorate of Policing just to make sure that we're kind of following within the realm. So it's a combination of information that is provided in the Act itself. Its governing rules are kind of backed by the municipal standard of Robert's rules, and then also some unique perspectives of the board itself determine our composition. So again, this is a draft version. There are items in here that are open for discussion and conversation, and I will highlight a couple, but certainly I would like every member to take a look at it and review. If there's anything that should be amended or changed before we adopt it as a guiding document, then that's your opportunity to do it. And again, we can always bring forward amendments down the road as well. But this becomes our Bible, and specifically the recording secretary, this becomes their guiding Bible as well. So a couple items just to kind of note, and you'll notice my copy is well flagged. So the general principles, and like I said, the guiding rules of this document are covered both within the procedural bylaw, but when failed, if say something comes up that we haven't addressed in here, we do revert back to the Act. The Act is ultimately our guiding legislation, as well as best practices identified in Robert's rules. So again, I want to note that because that comes into play with with motions and any type of procedural code of conduct or anything. The other thing I would note is right now we've identified a recording secretary, and I did make a mention to the fact that some boards have compositions where it's a secretary and a treasurer. This one is referring directly only to a recording secretary. I have actually removed the section right now for the secretary treasurer just until the board can kind of figure out the best path forward. But the recording secretary here, I noted in item 2.29, there has been recommendations from the industry that the recording secretary, especially when there's joint boards, that the recording secretary be a clerk or a designate from the municipality. That's not to say that the board has to go that way. Okay, I want to be very clear on that. The board can elect a recording secretary who they wish to move forward with. Typically that's appointed on an annual basis. Again, best practices has been to do some type of clerk or designate from one of the municipalities so that the reporting, the procedural bylaws, everything is they're familiar with it, I guess is a good way to put it, right? They understand the legislation, they understand with the procedural bylaw, and they move forward with it. But again, completely up to the board's decision. I'm just going to go through some of my tags as bringing to light just a couple things. Public notice. Through the Act, the public notice has stated... Yeah, of course. 2.4. Yep. I may have jumped around, I apologize. So 2.4 is public notice. Typically that's the date, time, location of the meeting. We are unique because we have 7 municipalities. Our meeting location can change at the board's discretion. It can be held always in one location. It could be held at each of the municipalities on a rotating basis. That's the board's decision. Again, we just have to make sure that public notice, when we give notice of that meeting, we indicate very clearly where it's going to be held. The Act states that we need to give 7 business days 7 days notice for the meeting. So unless we're calling it an emergency meeting for emergency reasons, we need to give that notice period. And that is different from the Municipal Act. The Municipal Act clearly states the 48 hours. We have a little bit longer of a time frame, so just something to be aware. When we post notice of that, we want to post notice of the agenda, the items that are going to be discussed at that meeting, so that it is very public, transparent. Okay. So number 4, which is, I did not put page numbers, I apologize. But it's item 4, which is specific rules specific to members. This procedural bylaw does outline a few specific rules that are with regards to each of the board members. What I'm going to state within there is this is generic, but a code of conduct really should be adopted directly by the board itself, right? So that's one of those documents that is required. It's a code of conduct policy adopted by a bylaw that will come forward that governs the board members specifically. So often that it corresponds with a municipality's code of conduct as well, but because we have community members and provincial appointees, I think it's important that the board has one of its own and specific. Moving right along. Item 7, which is order of business and general rules. I've outlined and again taken from a look at some of the best practices used for some of the detachment boards that are up and running. I've outlined kind of a flow of agenda. This absolutely can be discussed. This might not be how this board wants to operate. This is a recommendation. One of the things that I did remove one of the things I had removed, or at least I haven't clearly identified, is the approval of the agenda itself. As practice, you don't need to approve an agenda. The board itself, when it sits, does not need to do a motion to approve the agenda before. The agenda that's posted publicly automatically becomes the agenda that everybody has agreed to. During your meeting, if you were to change the flow of that agenda, if you were to move forward to an item or skip an item or defer an item, then that's a conversation that can happen on the floor. But again, when that agenda goes out, the agenda is deemed as being approved, and changes to that agenda are noted during the meeting and by a call of vote. Okay, so that's a clarification I've made. Again, the board may wish to go back to the practice of approving the agenda at every meeting. It's completely up to you guys. Okay, so some of the items I had is a call of order, a land acknowledgement, declaration of interest. These are all things that should be part of your normal meeting. The approval of the board and committee minutes. I have stated both, just in case there's any subcommittees that are created under this board. But basically the approval of minutes, delegations and presentations. Okay, so members of the public, anybody who wishes to speak to the board directly, any presentations that we have coming forward, say from the ministry, from, again, something more specific from the OPP, those would fall under the delegations and presentations. Reports, so like what we're seeing today, again, any reporting from the detachment commander, anything that's reporting, say, specifically on I'm going to use the example of grants, but something that's before the board, it's business of the board. External organizational updates. So something from the Zone 2 or the Ontario Policing, any type of updates that have come from the ministry, again, those would fall under there. Communications and announcements, opportunity for board members to speak up if there's anything that's happening within their community that they want to showcase. I would suggest it be relevant to the board, but maybe there's like a bike parade or something that is involving the OPP in your area that you might like to speak to. Notices of motions in which notice has previously been given. Most of you as members of council will be very familiar with that. So if a notice has been given at a previous meeting that you would like business to come forward, this is where that business would come forward. Okay, notice of motion. So I'm of the practice that rather than new business on an agenda, so rather than having a section that says new business where it's a free-for-all the night of a meeting where new business gets brought forward and that discussion happens, I do very much like transparency and accountability. My recommendation is always to make sure that the public knows what you're going to be discussing and have those discussions in a formal way. So you will see I often take out new business as an agenda item, but this is an area where notice can come forward, where any member of the board can bring forward something that they would either like discussed, they would like something to be directed, or they like to move forward on something. So again, they're giving notice so that the next meeting we know that it goes on the agenda. Okay? Again, that is something that can be discussed within the board. This is a recommendation. closed session. As I mentioned before, the Community Safety and Policing Act does specify strict reasons why we go into closed session. Those will always be noted on the agenda, and they always give the reason. The Act itself needs to be referenced, or should always be referenced, as to why, so what section of the Act you're going into, and then as it relates to what specifically. Okay, bylaws. So any bylaws that are getting approved by the board, this will also be the section that will have our confirmatory bylaw. So the confirmation of the meeting, the proceeding of the meetings, that's our closing bylaw. You will notice there is no closing bylaw for tonight, and the reason for that is because we haven't established our procedural bylaw yet. We have not established our rules to close a meeting. So our next meeting, if the board adopts the procedural bylaw, then we will have a confirmatory bylaw at that time that will precede this meeting and next meeting, or a future meeting if that's the case. And then adjournment, and then you guys all get to go. So again, I know that's long-winded, but that kind of gives you the outline, and certainly that is something that can be discussed and adopted to meet the needs of this board. Declaration of interest, which is 7.9. Typically, there is pecuniary interest, which is the most common that many people are very familiar with. So pecuniary interest has anything that deals with you directly with some type of money, financial gain, impact to you financially. The definition does expand out, and I would recommend that you would expand the definition out to include kind of indirect or direct interest, because not everything is money related, and in the case of that we're dealing with in what we're dealing with and what this board will be dealing with, it may not always come down to money, right? So including an expanded definition of interest, I think does aid you in making some informed decisions. Again, it is up to a member's responsibility to declare at a meeting. Ideally, if you know an agenda item that you are declaring on, if you can let the recording secretary know in advance, they will provide you with the proper paperwork, as well as it gives them a bit of a heads up for the meeting. So if anybody has any questions on that, let me know. Delegations, like I said, which is 710. Delegations can be made in a couple different ways. Delegations can be somebody who reaches out to the board and wishes to speak in an upcoming meeting. The delegation that is noted in this procedural bylaw right here actually speaks to any member of the public wishing to address an item on the agenda. It's slightly different than what you would see on a council agenda, where council agendas tend to defer away from having somebody come in and speak directly to an item that's just been posted on an agenda. So that might be an area of consideration. This, because we're putting this out to the public 7 days in advance and allowing lots of time for public to review, the practices that some of the detachment boards have allowed is that if any member of public sees an item on the agenda, that they can contact the recording secretary up to, I believe it is 24 hours in advance. They have until noon the day prior to the meeting to notify the recording secretary to come and speak to that item. So, yes, go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks, Carolyn. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So the rules of procedure require us to provide 48 hours notice publicly for a meeting, 7 days internally, but 48 hours publicly. But we're giving delegations, public delegations, 24 hours, which means that they have to be ready to hit the go button once it's been made. Am I understanding that right?
This is what I always Oh, no, good. Yep, sorry, okay. Just a slight clarification. So the Act states that we have to give 7 days notice. So for, no, across the board. So publicly, 48 hours has been more of like what we're used to on a municipal government side, but the Community Safety and Policing Act specifically states 7 days. So that's internally, externally, everything.
Okay, I appreciate that. I must have misread, because I thought, my understanding was that it was the 7 days within for
No.
agenda with ourselves, and then 48 hours outside, but if it is 7 days, then this 24 hours would seem more than reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good, thanks.
And so again, to then go back to the delegations, somebody could request to speak specifically to an item that's coming forward. Okay, so that might be worth discussing. That might be something that, whether you would like delegations to be brought forward to a next meeting only. Again, that's something that the board can have a discussion on. And I think that kind of covers the majority of what I wanted to highlight. I do know further into the procedural bylaw, it talks about the motion process, what point of privilege means, what a notice of intent means, but I think that's some really good reading material. I don't think there's anything that's needs to be highlighted at this time. Back to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, I would like to recognize all of your effort and work in pulling this together. And the inaugural first meeting is always the challenging one because it's when we're going through the procedural processes and getting our road plan and our house in order for the coming future. So giving us this space is very helpful. I would encourage people to read and go through based on the highlights that Carolyn has presented today, so that when we do come back for the second discussion and to make any revisions to this draft, that we do so with an informed read. So a lot easier to go through it. For those who've gone through it the first time pre this meeting, you get a certain lens, but now having the dialogue and the discussion, it makes it much easier to grasp some of the nuances. So I'd encourage you to spend a bit of time in the two documents and bringing them back. Any discussion or comment or further questions from the floor?
I just have one itty-bitty one also on delegations. There's a mention that no person will display signs or distribute information out of our delegates. Would it, I'm hoping it would be acceptable to the group that if someone does register, as they do need to, as part of to be a delegate, that they would be given the opportunity to distribute? Is there a special reason I'm not understanding that they're not allowed to, or?
Which one are you referring to?
I'm sorry, 4.2.5. 4.2.5, just under delegations, and it just jumped out. I don't want to pretend that I've read the entire document, and that's my only concern or anything like that, but I know that we've always appreciated receiving some comments when we have a delegate that comes forward, subject to the clerk or the secretary's approval before it gets distributed.
So I would say, and again, some wording could easily be changed to be clarified, that in the case of this wording, I would think that they're discussing more like signs in the gallery, or information distributed that is outside of what has already been established for the agenda. I absolutely agree that if a delegation is coming forward, they should probably indicate specifically to the recording secretary as to their intent as to what they would like to discuss, and if there's any information that they would like to provide as context. I think it is very important that that information be distributed. So I do agree with you that documentation should be distributed in advance. What I like with council is that most councils will move forward with delegations on a separate meeting. So if they have an issue with an item on the agenda, that they'll move forward with a delegation in a separate meeting. One, because they can provide that documentation in advance, and it can be included as part of the agenda. So it's a very open, transparent way. The delegation that speaks to this procedural bylaw speaking to the delegation gives a little bit slightly less time frame. So if somebody's coming to the meeting, you're getting that information at the meeting, which can always be included as a post-agenda package, but it's not as open and transparent, so it's not being provided in advance. But I do think in reference to 4.25, that is signage in the gallery and maybe some unsolicited. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Through you.
Yeah, through the chair. With the whole delegation thing, I know myself, I would prefer as soon as, if they're going to come and address the board, they probably know before 24 hours. So if they're going to have what they're presenting, I know with council, we're given a complete, their package. That way there, I can do my due diligence as a councillor, board member, and I can do the legwork and try to get as much information as I can to make yourself ready. I don't know, I'd just like to see that as part of the rules, is as soon as they commit that they have some kind of outline formally that we will get as the board. I just think it's going to be much easier for us whenever they're in front of us, that if, even some of us have had the time to do the legwork, it's going to probably flow a lot faster.
So through you, Chair. So I think that's a great idea, and certainly those timeframes can be identified and adjusted. So maybe we can tweak the wording a little bit. What I would suggest is that as everybody has time to review this, is that maybe some of the information could be emailed to me as some suggestions, and then what we would do is we would bring forward all of those suggestions to the next meeting, and we can adopt them in. So I would again take all the suggestions and kind of draft it in a document, and then we can select which items, as the board can select, which items would then move forward as part of the guiding document.
Thank you. Councillor Fields?
Oh.
I'm not certain about the procedure of it all, but I know for ours, you actually have to fill out a form in order to become a delegate. So who you are, what you want to say, that sort of thing. So if that could be something that we can look at, instead of just some random people saying they want to come. That would just be my suggestion. Then we've got a bit more information.
Thank you. And Mayor McGee?
Thanks. One of the things that we're supposed to be determining is whether we're doing a rotating, whether we're rotating through, whether we're always going to meet here. And one of the things that, actually maybe a question to the gallery on this one, with previous experience with Police Services Board at the City of Ottawa, security is always, believe it or not everybody always welcomes the discussions that happen at a Police Services Board, and it's not always a popular one. So, and recognizing that each of us have different levels of security and the ability maybe to keep things closed from the public in the event that there is something contentious, could happen, right? Is this something that you would recommend be considered as part of the decision on how we roll forward with that, or?
Or to have that assigned security during your meetings?
No, not necessarily, but just that the security of any of our different locations be a consideration in our decision about how we rotate through or not rotate through, or like, for example, City of Ottawa is a very, their Police Services Board meet in a very, very contained, very secure. We are far from the City of Ottawa, but maybe it is something that we should be considering in terms of safety and security of that. And
That'd be at the board's discretion. I think, depending on what the issue is, if it's a police matter, there's high risk, I'd say it's a conversation. But you want to be secure from people being able to eavesdrop, right? The building sound, the room sound, so that somebody's not out in the lobby hearing a closed session, everything that's being discussed during that time.
Okay.
So we're usually in uniform, and we both come armed, so like physical security, you'd have us in the room for that part.
Okay, no, and that's terrific. And so maybe that is another consideration for things like closed sessions. Can we all accommodate, especially through the daytime, the kind of activity outside of a room? I know Arnprior Town Hall, for a closed session, we're in an old building, and it's not necessarily soundproof, for example. So that might be a consideration for some things that we're looking at. Anyway, just something to think about as we're talking about how we're rotating through or not.
Thank you. I also think it's something that we can have a more fulsome discussion on at our second meeting once we get the draft coming back for discussion and final. because I think the rotation has other elements to it as well for consideration. We will need to discuss budgetary items and cost and logistics, what makes sense in terms of travel time, because we're from 7 different municipalities. I like the idea of the transparency and being present in the 7 municipalities. This is not tied just to the Renfrew community. It represents all of us. I think that's a very clear message we'll need to send from this board. But it's not just the element of providing security. It's the fiscal, it's the recording, it's the staff time, it's the infrastructure. And depending on the frequency of meetings, we'll need to discuss what's the simplest. But the security is something I think we need to have in our minds. It's a little different from that of which we are normally used to at a council, most council meetings. But the sensitivity of the discussions we'll be having is something I think we need to have forefront. But very good point, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? All right, so hearing none, I'd like to call a vote that this comes back for the final draft for the board's approval at our next scheduled meeting. All in favor? Carried, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 8, external organizational updates. There doesn't seem to be any noted. So moving on to agenda item 9, communications and announcements. Is there any community announcements related to the board's mandate that people would like to make from the floor? Hearing none, brings us to our closed session. And we'll be moving into closed. I'll read the motion. And do you want to preface it, or we just go straight into closed through the motion?
Through the motion, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So the motion before us is that the Renfrew Police Services OPP Detachment Board convene in closed session with the town clerk Errett remaining in the room, pursuant to the following section of the Community Safety and Policing Act 2019, Section 2B, Section 44, 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including members of the police service or any other employees of the board. More specifically, how it relates to community member appointments. And the time now is 2:01 p.m. If I could have a mover and a seconder to bring us into closed. Councillor Field, and seconded by Councillor Broom. Thank you. And we'll be moving into closed, so if we could have the room, please.
Yeah. No, so they'll have to.
No, we'll need just the, so we're still being recorded
Currently, yes.
currently.
Come up.